trauma comes up in the circle a lot because we've all experienced trauma. Um, and again, women get upset. They react to their past and their pain. And I think the typical response that we're socialized as women is that we go comfort them. How is it different in the body sex circle?
Well, I find comfort condescending.
Hmm.
Comfort is saying, I'm here and you're here. And what you happened to you was so horrible. Oh my God, I have to come over now and I have to give you a hug and let you cry and just be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Okay. Acknowledgement looks like this: what happened to you was wrong.
Hmm.
Because as women, we never speak out about our trauma. And so it's in our mind, and we all question whether or not we're crazy or we made it happen. We blame ourselves. Never sat with a woman who blamed anyone but themselves. So the way we break that is we say, we acknowledge it. Someone does a share. That was a painful thing. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And that was wrong. That
Yes.
was fucked up,
Hmm.
however you want to phrase it. And that's it.
Right, right.
There's no more where we go into the details don't matter.
Mhm,
Reliving them doesn't make you feel better.
mhm,
So
mhm.
we want to share it in the circle and it kind of stays there. And then we replace it with pleasure.
Yes, yes, and if you put the focus of the circle on one woman's pain, on one woman's trauma, it breaks the energy of the circle, right? Because now there's not equality. Now there's a victim. You don't want to, like, feed the victim mentality. You want to acknowledge, but move on. And we have to trust the women that if they need time, because sometimes a memory comes up, sometimes there's a woman in the circle who's triggered, and that's fine. They might need, you can invite them to leave the circle to gather themselves. We have to trust women that they can take care of themselves. They got to the circle, right?
Well, and look how strong we are.
Right, right.
I mean, I always think about it. You hear these stories like, oh, they're dropping bombs. A woman's giving birth.
Mhm.
Right? I was just reading a story of a woman who walked for 2 days with her kid on her back to get the child an antibiotic.
Right.
You know what I mean? We are so strong. We live longer. We're hardier.
Mhm.
We have a sophisticated multitasking mind, a sophisticated sex organ. We are
Mhm.
capable of endless pleasure. And Betty always believed that. She would
Yes.
always say, I believe in women. So,
Mhm.
what do we do when we believe in someone, right? We build them up.
Right.
We don't stay with them and go, "Oh, you poor thing." Now, how we do that is language. So, if
Mhm.
someone shares something, we don't react and like, "Oh my God," like we're not shocked.
Right.
All right.
Right.
This is run of the mill stuff that happens to women. There's
Mhm.
nothing new under the sun. We've all heard the horrible stories. We listen
Mhm.
and we acknowledge and then we lead them forward. So, how do you react? You can say things like, as women, we all know the tragedy of being born female. There's a
Mhm.
moment when we realize that we don't have the same value.
Mhm.
Or as women, we all know those moments where, like, all of a sudden a situation changes and you have to read the world room and you're unsafe,
Mhm.
right? You put yourself in there with them,
Right.
right? So we're equal, we acknowledge, and then, don't be afraid to for things to be light right after a heavy share.
Mhm.
Right? Laughter is abandon, laughter is healing.
Mm.
So, very often Betty would do that. And I'm thinking of one particular woman who was a friend of mine
Mhm.
who took a circle. And it took a while. I mean, we were running workshops for about 7 years
Mhm.
before she took the circle, and she was sitting right next to Betty. And she
Mhm.
was the last to share. And her share, she started to get very emotional. And she was, and she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I get so emotional." And Betty looked at her and said, "Life's emotional."
Mhm.
And it hung in the air. And I thought, like, oh no, because I'm a newbie. And I'm thinking, I, and her share was she was molested by her father as a little girl at
Mhm.
bedtime. and she's gay, and her family's Christian, and they all think that she's gay because of that as a reaction.
Mm.
So it's like guilt, guilt, sexual.
Right. Yeah.
And the weekend ended. I didn't address it. I let it there and I thought, oh, and she called me and she said, Carlin, I want you to know in that moment I was healed. It was over. She's right. Life's emotional.
Right. Yes. Yes.
No one gets through unscathed, right?
Yes. Mhm.
So, you got a little cut or two. Pick yourself up.
Right, right, right. And I think that matter of factness really it puts you it's just kind of like, "Oh, I can heal from this." Betty was always just like so direct and she was just, very very great like, "Get over yourself." And that's that's it. That puts you moving forward. It puts you moving into the future. And
Mhm.
that's where you want to be. We don't want to be stuck in the past. Um, Pleasure and orgasm is physical. And what happened in the past, just because you broke your leg doesn't mean you're never going to walk again. You know, you can
Absolutely.
heal, you can move forward. And that's the message. And I think as facilitators, we need to be the ones to believe that. And it's not a matter of diminishing anyone's pain because you acknowledge it, but you don't feed the pain. Don't feed the pain.
And don't feel sorry.
Yeah. Mhm.
Does anyone like pity?
Mhm.
Right? Does anyone
Right.
like someone going, "Oh, you poor thing"?
Mhm.
I say this all the time. We're not defined by how other people treat us.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a
Exactly.
shift. I'm shifting my belief system of I don't find value in how other people see me or value me. My
Mhm.
value is here. I can do it for myself. I love
Mhm.
myself.
Yes. Yes. So, in the circle, we're going to keep the focus on the group during the shares and not let one individual kind of hijack the whole group. Now, when you're working one on one with a client, a response to trauma can be a little different. And Carlin, I love the story that you tell about the one client that had been raped and remember the mom blamed her?
Oh, yes. So this
Yes.
was a client who, when she was 14, was raped by an 18-year-old. So
Mhm.
he was her neighbor in an apartment building, lured her there, right? They're kind of friends. They know each other. Their moms know each other. One thing led to another, and she's 14. I mean,
Mhm.
you really don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know how to say yes or no.
Right.
So her mom comes home from work. Where is she? Comes in the apartment, sees her in bed with the boy. So now she's the slut. She's, labeled, and she brings her home and punishes her. And she's sharing this, and I can see, and I do this very often. It's like a remothering. Like I will
Mhm.
respond. Sometimes I'll assume the role of the mother. I've done that in email exchanges with clients. Well, I'll just say the things that they need to hear. So I just
Mhm.
looked her in the eyes and I said, if I was your mom, I would have gone in that room. I probably would have physically attacked that boy and been like, are you kidding me? I would have called the police. I would have done a rape kit and I would have stayed with you the whole time, right? Not
Mhm.
let you go with the doctor by yourself. I mean, think about how traumatizing that is. And then we would have gone home. I would have put you in the bathtub and I would have washed you. And then I would have put you in your pajamas and put you in bed with a pint of ice cream and sat next to you and watched something on Netflix and held you. And she welled up in tears and she cried. And I feel like we do have that power that we can just say the things that they want to hear, because I think that's what we want to hear. We want to hear that something was wrong, and then we want to hear the right thing.
Mhm.
Not my
Exactly.
fault, right? It's not your fault,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And this is what I would do if I was your mother. And I could see visually in her face, like
Mhm.
you see the tension kind of fade,
Mhm.
you know? And I know, Laura, I said that to you. When you wrote your thesis, I said, what happened to you was fucked up.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And it immediately like went to my heart And I mean, I am feeling emotional about it now. I mean, we need to hear sometimes, like, what happened to you was fucked up, and that's part of the healing that you can do as a facilitator, and as a coach. Uh, the difference, I think when you're in the circle, it needs to be shorter. And I remember when you said to me, like, I hadn't just shared my story, you had read my thesis, and we were in, like, it was a group situation. But the first time you saw me, you said, Laura, that was fucked up. And I knew exactly what you were talking about, you know,
Mhm.
like, and
So it can be an aside
it
one-on-one.
right. So when you're with a group, it's okay. And, but then you can move on. But when you're one on one, you can get in more detail like you did with the individual client. So that's something to keep in mind too. Um, in that healing, though, you didn't keep them in the victim mode,
Mhm.
right? Which is what I love about it. I mean, you just said, "I'm sorry that happened. It shouldn't have happened. This is what I would have done." And then you reframe, you, in a sense, give them what they should have gotten in that moment instead of being blamed. And really, in that situation, it was like double victimhood because then the mother blamed the daughter. And then
Which
that's
is the common story, right?
right,
That something sexual happens with a teen girl and now she's dirty and she's sullied. I
right.
know because I experienced that in a religious
Yes.
environment. I understand.
Hmm.
And that's all I wanted.
Right.
All I wanted
Right.
for someone to say, "It wasn't your fault." It's almost like giving them permission to be human,
Yes.
right? We make mistakes, we make bad decisions sometimes.
Hmm.
Very often, if I'm working with a client living in a sexless marriage, they'll often blame themselves for infidelity, or
Hmm.
they'll blame themselves for, like, coming on to someone online. And I'll say, "What? You're human. You have needs.
Right.
If your partner isn't having sex with you, right? That's a need for intimacy and affection and closeness. I
Hmm.
mean, it used to be grounds for divorce,
Hmm.
right? And if a woman wasn't having sex with her husband, we all know what would be expected. So why is
Right.
it different for you?
Hmm.
You're not a martyr.
Yes.
Forgive yourself for being human.
Right.
That's a really easy thing to say to someone. Forgive yourself for being human.
Right, right, right. Exactly, exactly. So reframing, saying the words that should have been said, helping them through it, but without staying stuck in the past and just reminding them pleasure heals. You deserve pleasure. And so now we're going to move into the next phase. We're going to look at pleasure in the present, and we're going to look forward to a pleasure filled future. And in that, you're going to find healing.